The first question I wanted to ask you is, how would you define vulnerability?
So I see vulnerability as when people get in touch with parts of themselves that are dark or uncomfortable or that they're struggling with, and they're able to open up and express that to another human being. And that's risky because people could reject that and not be accepting of that. But it's also really freeing because it's challenging our own perfectionism that we tell ourselves, I need to be this way, I need to be looking this way when I'm around people, I need to be talking this way. And if we can kind of let go of that and be like, here's who I really am and I'm not perfect, then you're not so consumed by what other people think and having to be a certain way.
How does one show vulnerability in relationships, specifically couples?
So I think there's a spectrum of being vulnerable in a romantic relationship, and being on either extreme can be unhealthy, and the goal would be more to be in the middle. So on the one extreme, keeping things in and having walls up and not sharing our vulnerable parts, that's going to be hard in a relationship because the other person is going to feel like they're cut off or like the other person is unavailable for them. So that's one extreme. The other extreme would be somebody who overshares, and anybody who looks at them at the bus stop, at the grocery store, they just spit out their whole life story, or even with their partner, right? They might just be always sharing these vulnerable things. And if it isn't reciprocal, so if after the sharing, they're not eventually saying, tell me about what's going on for you, and I'm really interested in your pains and your struggles and your rawness, then it's just going to be one way. So how to kind of find the middle would maybe be to look at, what's my purpose in being vulnerable? Am I trying to have more connection? Do I want to get closer with my partner, with the other person? Do I want to share my truth, and it's just important for me to be honest and open? So I think having kind of your purpose in the back of your mind can help to have more of a healthy vulnerability versus either extreme.
So what else can people do to be in the middle in that vulnerability spectrum?
So I think trust can be really important, right? So if you're feeling unsafe in a relationship, if it's an unhealthy relationship and you're being vulnerable, for example, if the other person is emotionally abusive, physically abusive, that's not a healthy situation to share and be vulnerable, because they are going to hurt those soft, vulnerable parts. So having a balance of healthy boundaries of, is this person safe for me to tell this to? But then not on the other extreme, over-analyzing and never sharing because we're afraid of rejection, because it is a risk in order to be vulnerable.
Why is vulnerability so hard to achieve?
So it's risky, right? All of us have had times where we've been vulnerable and opened up and then been hurt. And people have just been not accepting or just done things that have really been painful for us when we've been vulnerable. So it's risky to open ourselves up. There is always that risk. I think what could be helpful in pushing forward is to say, okay, this is scary and I don't know how the other person's going to react, but I'm going to do it anyways because it's important for me to be true to myself and to let this part of me be witnessed.
How can someone overcome those feelings of not wanting to be vulnerable?
One way is exposure therapy. So just by simply doing it, just by, I'm really feeling uncomfortable being vulnerable. This is not something that's natural for me. The more we do it, the easier it gets. But the more people can just ask themselves questions maybe of, what is holding me back from being vulnerable? Why is this so hard? And ultimately, why would I want to be vulnerable? Well, I crave a close relationship with somebody else. Okay, so then maybe that is a big enough motivator to work on this discomfort with being vulnerable. And it's giving us permission with that vulnerability to say, I love this relationship. It almost instills more love and like passion and compassion of like, we're pretty awesome. Like, yeah, it's messy, and yeah, sometimes things are not fun, but that's like a part of the messy, beautiful, vulnerable thing that makes our marriage awesome. So I think it only just made us closer.